Hey there, awesome people and super cool followers. What's up, everyone? Hope you're all doing great and in the best of health. Today, I'm diving into a topic that's seriously mind-blowing, one that'll make you space out, think, and say, wait, is this for real? We're going way back in history, to a place that feels ancient, but seriously, you'll see how close it is to everything we see around us. We're talking about the creation stories of ancient Iraq, or as we call it, Mesopotamia.
So, imagine this, my friends. The people of Mesopotamia used to picture the Earth as this giant, flat disk surrounded by a border of mountains, like a belt. And all of it was floating on a freshwater ocean they called the Abzu, or Apsu. Above these mountains, there was this massive celestial arch separating the sky, which they called Lil, meaning air or atmosphere, from the Earth, and that's where all our stars and planets orbited. And get this, there was another half exactly like it underneath the Earth, holding the underworld where the souls of the dead resided. The entire universe, which they called Anki, heaven Earth, was completely submerged like a huge bubble in a limitless ocean of uncreated primordial life. Basically, their Earth only included Mesopotamia and the areas immediately surrounding it. Right in the middle of this Earth, you had the city of Babylon for the Babylonians, or maybe Nippur for the Sumerians. Now, here come the questions that'll make your head spin. How was this world created? And who even created it in the first place? Well, my friend, the answers to these questions varied depending on the myth they followed. For instance, one myth says that Anu created the heavens, and Enki created the Absu to be his home and dwelling. Another myth, though, attributes the creation of the cosmos to 4 great gods who worked together as a team. There was even the spell they used to get rid of the bug that caused toothaches, and it went like this. Anu is the creator of the heavens, and the heavens created the earth, and the earth created the rivers, and the rivers created the canals, and the canals created the marshes, and the marshes created that bug. But honestly, this chain is kind of like the old English nursery rhyme, the house that Jack built, so we can't really rely on it too much. But there's another interesting and important version, this one coming from the city of Sippar. It says that the great Babylonian god Marduk built a reed platform, like a boat, on the surface of the water, and then he created dirt and piled it around it. It's pretty clear here that we're talking about an accurate description of how the marsh Arabs in southern Iraq used to make those artificial islands to build their reed huts. Generally speaking, the Sumerians believed that the primordial ocean, personified by the goddess Namu, single-handedly gave birth to the sky, male, and the earth, female, and that was it. So the sky became linked with the earth, and as a result of their union, the god Enlil, the lord of the air, was born. He separated the sky from the earth, and with the latter created all living things. This theory, which states that the ocean was the primordial element from which the cosmos was created and that the cosmos resulted from the separation of earth from sky, a separation forced by a third group of gods, was very widespread in Sumer, Babylon, and Assyria. This forms the basis of one of the most complete and detailed creation stories we have, the great Babylonian epic called Enuma Elish, meaning when on high. But the Babylonian creation story has really deep philosophical dimensions because it doesn't describe creation as a beginning. No, it describes it as an end. And it's not just some mysterious, unexplained act by a single god. Instead, it was the result of a cosmic battle between 2 faces of nature, good and evil, order and chaos. Enuma Elish is a long poem written on 7 tablets, originally composed during the Old Babylonian period, starting from the 2nd millennium BCE, even though all the discovered copies so far date back to the 1st millennium BCE. In most versions, Marduk, the god of the city of Babylon, plays the main role, but an Assyrian version was discovered that uses the name of the god Ashur, the god of the Assyrian homeland, instead of Marduk. On the other hand, one of these poems calls Marduk Enlil of the gods. And as we know, Marduk had usurped the position and privilege from the Sumerian god Enlil. That's why we can almost certainly guess that the original hero of the epic was the god Enlil, as the Sumerian cosmology theory we mentioned earlier suggests. The creators of the Mesopotamian myths drew their inspiration from the very nature of their land. Imagine standing today on a thick, foggy morning near the current coast of Iraq by the Shatt al-Arab. What would you see? you definitely see low clouds hanging on the horizon and springs of fresh water bubbling up from under the ground, mixing with the salty waters of the Gulf. As for the low-lying muddy plains that make up the dry land, you wouldn't be able to see more than a few feet of them. Everything around you, the sky, the land, and the sea, would be blended into a vague, watery, misty chaos. That's exactly how the authors of this epic, who must have observed such scenes many times, imagined how the world began to form. So, when nothing had yet been named, meaning when nothing had yet been created, the authors of this myth wrote that Apsu, the freshwater, Tiamat, the saltwater, and Mumu, the clouds, all united into one turbulent body. And in this passage from the Enuma Elish, when on high the heaven had not been named, firm ground below had not been called by name. Not but primordial Apsu, their begetter, and Mumu and Tiamat, she who bore them all. Their waters commingling as a single body. No reed hut had been matted, no marshland had appeared, when no gods whatever had been brought into being, and no names pronounced, no destinies decreed, then from them gods were born. And then, in the text we just described, larger pieces of dry land began to emerge from the fog as the sun rose higher, and the horizon line separating the sky from the water and the water from the land became clear. That's why the first gods in this myth, Lahmu and Lahamu, represented silt. Then came Anshar and Kishar, the twin horizons of sky and earth. And then Anshar and Kishar gave birth to their son, the god Anu, who in turn gave birth to the god Ea, or Enki. Around the same time, or shortly after, several lesser gods were born from Apsu and Tiamat. The poem doesn't mention anything about these gods except that they were joyful and active and boisterous enough to annoy Joth and Tiamat, angering the parents to the point that they decided to completely destroy them. When the great gods heard of their plan, Lamu, Lahamu, Anshar, Kishar, Anu, and Ea, they were shocked and dismayed, believing that the vitality of life was far better than peace based on idleness and deep chaos. Anyway, Ea, the wisest god, managed to find a way to spoil the wicked parents' scheme by devising a master plan. He cast a magical spell on Mumu, which paralyzed him, and similarly put Apsu to sleep and slew him. After this dual victory, Ea returned to his temple, which was now established over the abyss of fresh water, Apsu, and with his wife Damkina, he begot his son Marduk, who possessed extraordinary and perfect qualities. His members were incredibly perfect, he was incomprehensible and impossible to grasp. 4 were his eyes and 4 were his ears, and as soon as his lips parted, tongues of flame would dart forth. Great were his 4 organs of hearing, and his eyes, equal in number, saw everything. He was the loftiest of the gods, of colossal build, his members were numerous, and he was gigantic. In the meantime, Tiamat was still alive and free, and she was overcome with rage and declared war on the gods. She created a number of monstrous dragons and serpents with sharp teeth, multiple fangs, and poisonous blood, and appointed one of her sons, Kingu, the wicked one, at the head of this terrifying army. When the gods heard of this plan, they were struck with terror and panic. Anshar bit his lip in terror and cried out that Kingu must be killed. But who would dare such a deed? The gods hesitated one after another, refusing to fight, except for Marduk, who agreed to undertake this difficult mission on the condition that the gods make him their king. "Assemble your council," Marduk declared, "and proclaim that my destiny is supreme and that my word, not yours, shall determine fates." The gods had no choice but to yield to his wish, so they gathered for a feast, and half-drunk, they bestowed royal powers and the insignia of authority upon Marduk. Marduk chose the bow, lightning, stormy floods, the 4 winds, and a net as his weapons. He donned the armor of terror and the tiara of terrifying splendor, mounted his storm chariot, and set out alone to confront the forces of chaos. When the army of monsters saw him, they scattered here and there, and Marduk captured their leader, Kingu. As for Tiamat, she was ensnared by Marduk's net, and when she opened her mouth, Marduk sent the 4 winds into it, tore out her heart with an arrow, smashed her skull with his mace, and then split her body in 2 like a mussel. He created the sky from the first half and raised it, while he placed the other half under the earth. After this victory, Marduk organized the cosmos, establishing the paths of the sun, moon, and stars in the new sky, and decided to create humans. He said, "I will create a savage, whose name shall be man. I will create savage man surely. He shall be responsible for the service of the gods, so that they may live at ease." According to Ea's advice, Quintzco was killed, and from his blood, Marduk and his father created the first human being. After that, Marduk divided the gods into two groups, each containing 300 gods. The first group had to live in the sky, and the second group had to live on earth with humans. As a reward for his victory, the gods built Marduk's great temple in Babylon, and they gathered again for a grand feast and proclaimed his 50 names. Despite how childish this story might seem, it had a profound impact on the Babylonians. It provided their deeply religious minds with the supernatural yet acceptable explanation for the creation of the universe. It clarified, among other things, how the world took its perceived form. It clearly demonstrated that humans must serve the gods and explained why a natural element of evil existed in humans who were created from the blood of the wicked Quingi. It also justified Marduk's originally Enlil's position after his heroic act. But above all, it possessed powerful magic-like quality. And if the poem, When on High, continued to be recited by the priests of Babylon every year on the fourth day of the New Year celebrations for almost 2,000 years, it's because the Babylonians felt that the cosmic battle had never truly ended, and that the forces of evil and chaos were always ready to threaten and challenge the established order of the gods. The human connection to the gods, just like their connection to other people, had its degrees. For example, if the king of Babylon was directly subject to Marduk's commands, the simple Babylonian farmer had a closer relationship with the god Ashnan, god of grain, or Shumukan, god of cattle, not with the great gods like Anu or Enlil. In addition to this, there were many gods responsible for important life events. If needed, they could recite a prayer or offer a date sacrifice to appease Gula, goddess of childbirth, or Pasak, protector of travelers. In critical emergencies, assistance from the greater gods could be sought through priests or directly through the personal god, who was always present like a guardian angel beside every man and woman. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians looked upon their gods much like servants looked upon their benevolent masters, with fear and humility, but also with love and admiration. The greatest virtues for both kings and common people were obedience to the divine will, because serving the gods was considered one of the sacred duties. While celebrating various festivals and performing complex religious rituals were the domain of the priests, it was every citizen's duty to send offerings to the temples, attend major celebrations, care for the dead, pray, and seek forgiveness, in addition to adhering to the many commands and taboos that marked every step of their lives. A wise person feared the gods and meticulously carried out their teachings, and whoever did otherwise was not only foolish and oblivious, but also incurred sins that caused the most devastating punishments for humans. But don't get it twisted. It's wrong to think that the religion of Mesopotamia was merely a purely formal affair. When prayers were offered and hymns chanted in the temples, delicate feelings would shine through, and sincere emotions towards the gods would erupt. The people of Mesopotamia put all their trust in their gods and relied on them just like children rely on their parents. They would speak to their gods as if they were their true fathers and mothers, who could be displeased and slow down blessings, and who could also be appeased and grant forgiveness for sins and transgressions. And offering sacrifices and adherence to religious principles weren't the all that the gods of Mesopotamia required from their worshippers. While making the hearts of the gods glow with joy and making them intoxicated with abundant feasts was certainly a duty, it wasn't enough on its own. The compassion and blessings of the gods only descended upon those who lived good lives, who were good fathers, dutiful sons, kind neighbors, and good citizens, and who did good deeds and performed righteous work. The gods valued, just as we do today, compassion, mercy, loyalty, justice, and respect for social laws and norms. One of the Babylonian wisdom teachings recommends, worship your God daily and show kindness to the weak, do not humiliate the poor, do good deeds, and offer help in all your days. Do not slander others and speak good things.
say no wicked things, and speak beautifully of people. As a reward for sincere faith and righteous conduct, the gods offered humans assistance and protection in times of danger, comforted them, and bestowed upon them abundant health, an honorable social status, wealth, many children, happiness, and a long life. The Sumerians and Babylonians were content with this because they were practical, humble people who loved and enjoyed life above all else. Their dearest dream was to live forever. Many of their popular myths, especially the myths of Oedipus and Gilgamesh, aimed to explain why humans were deprived of the privilege of immortality. But only the gods were immortal. Human death was inevitable and had to be accepted. Only the gods live forever under the sun, but humans' days are numbered, and all they gain is but a passing wind.
Thousands of graves, with their tools and funerary equipment, prove the widespread belief among the people of Mesopotamia in the existence of an afterlife. The dead carried their most precious belongings with them and received food and drink from the living. However, the details of the ancient Mesopotamians' belief in the afterlife, derived from the story of Inanna's descent to the underworld and the epic of Gilgamesh, are scarce and often contradictory. The land of no return was a vast, sprawling space located somewhere beneath the earth, containing a magnificent palace where Ereshkigal, the Sumerian goddess similar to Persephone, and her husband Nergal, god of war and plague, ruled, surrounded by a number of gods and guardians. To reach this palace, the souls of the dead had to cross a river by boat, as was the case in the Greek Hades, their abode of the dead, and shed their clothes. After that, these souls lived a terrifying, harsh life, where dust is their food and clay their sustenance, where they see no light and live in darkness, where they're clothed like birds in robes of wings, where dust covers the door and bolt. But we know from other sources that the sun illuminated the underworld on its path around the earth, and that the sun god Utu issued judgments on the dead, meaning they were not all treated with such cruelty. It seems that the Sumerians' idea of the underworld was as vague as our own, and that a large amount of afterlife literature was a poetic fantasy for a loose concept. Anyway, death wasn't the only thing that caught the attention of the people of Mesopotamia. They were also concerned, like us, with the diseases, misery, deprivation, and sorrow that afflicted them. And they also asked, like us, how can all this happen when the wise gods are running the world? How can evil prevail over good? And certainly it was always possible to blame man himself. The network of taboos and religious principles surrounding the Mesopotamian person was so tight that committing a sin and incurring the gods' displeasure was one of the easiest things to do. But there were cases where people were punished without committing any blameworthy sin, and here it seemed that the gods acted in an incomprehensible way towards them. In a Babylonian poem called Ludlul Bel Nimeki, the feeling of a man who once enjoyed wealth, nobility, and robust health, but he suddenly turns into a person broken and hated by everyone, afflicted with the deadliest diseases. And, as happens later, the god Marduk finally lightens his burden and saves him from his troubles. But the Babylonian Job also experienced moments when he doubted the wisdom of heaven, as he bitterly cried out, "Who knows the will of the gods in heaven? Who comprehends the plans of the gods of the underworld? Where do mortals learn the way of the gods?"
He who was alive yesterday is dead today. For a moment, a man is depressed. Suddenly, he is joyful. Once people revel in ecstasy, and in the next moment, they groan like professional mourners. I am confused by all this, for I do not understand its purpose. However, the famous pessimism among the Babylonians was much more than just a fleeting moment of despair. This pessimism was, in reality, metaphysical in essence and not moral, because its roots lay in the apparent natural conditions of Mesopotamia itself. The Tigris and Euphrates Valley was a land of sudden, drastic changes. The very rivers that brought life could also cause disasters. Winters were often bitterly cold or excessively dry, and summer winds were no more agreeable. And torrential rains could, in a few moments, turn a dry, cultivated plain into a sea of mud. And in the middle of any beautiful day, a sandstorm or a whirlwind could appear from the sky and cause destruction. Because these phenomena were interpreted as supernatural forces, the people of Mesopotamia found themselves bewildered and powerless. And the person of Mesopotamia felt extreme anxiety from the belief that there was nothing stable. Their life and the lives of their family members, the produce of their fields and their livestock, the succession of river floods and their levels, the rotation of seasons, and even the existence of the universe itself were constantly at the mercy of fate. So, if chaos did not seize the cosmos, and if the world remained stable, and if humans remained alive, and if life returned to the fields after the scorching summer heat, and if the moon, sun, and stars continued to orbit in the sky, then all this was the work of the gods' will. But the sacred will of the gods was not issued once and for all at the origin of all things. That is why it was necessary to ensure its renewal at the beginning of each year, that is, before the coming harsh summer, when nature seems dead and the future is filled with all that is unknown. And there was nothing for humans to do in these critical circumstances but to ensure the goodwill of the gods by performing age-old rituals that guaranteed the establishment of order and the continuation of life. That is why, in the spring of each year, massive and exciting celebrations were held in many cities. And in Babylon in particular, these celebrations, called Akitu, or New Year's Festival, included rituals of the sacred marriage of the gods, the recitation of the great creation story, the reinstallation of kings, and culminated with the solemn gathering of all the gods who decree destinies. Only then could the king return to his throne, the shepherd to his flock, and the farmer to his field. And then too, the inhabitants of Mesopotamia would regain their confidence in their surroundings, for the world could continue to exist by the will of the appeased gods for another year. And with that, we reach the end of our exciting and astonishing journey into the world of ancient Mesopotamian myths. A world full of stories and tales that for us might just be myth, but for people who lived thousands of years ago, they were the absolute truth. They explained the universe, life, and death. They determined their fate and made them understand everything happening around them. So, after everything we've learned, do you still have the same thoughts about the universe and life? Or have new questions started swirling in your mind? Could there be a grain of truth in all these myths? And did our own pharaohs have similar stories? That's something we can discuss in many more videos. If you liked this video and enjoyed this mysterious journey, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on the notification bell so you get all the new stuff right away. And leave me your thoughts in the comments below. What was the most captivating thing you learned about Mesopotamian myths? And what topic would you like us to discuss next time? See you soon in a new video with new secrets. Peace out, everyone.